Hello, folks. Welcome to Holding On with Holder, where I talk to interesting people about interesting topics. My name is Steve Holder, and I am your host. My guest tonight is Anne Feustel, author of Our Favorite Movies, How Films Affect Our Mental Health. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. So tell us a little bit about you. Who are you?
Sure. I have my own business. I'm an editor, proofreader, freelance writer, data entry tech, and transcriber. I also have bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and I'm an author.
Okay. How old were you when you were diagnosed with bipolar?
I was 22.
22. Okay.
Mhm.
And does that affect your life in a big way?
Oh, definitely. It definitely affects my life in both, I would say, positive and negative ways. I mean, I have to deal with depression. I have to deal with, mania, which is, for those of you who don't know out there who are listening, mania is like the opposite of depression. It's extremely high highs. And, the symptoms of bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder can be very difficult to live with. They're difficult at times for me, but I also find that I get gifts like the gift of empathy from the experiences that I have because of my mental health disorders.
Yeah. So bipolar means you go back and forth from mania to depression, mania to depression, back and forth, right?
Right. It's not like it depending on the type of bipolar disorder somebody has. Some people might go back and forth several times a day. I usually go back and forth a few times a year.
Okay. So you're what's called a lone cycler. I think that's the term, correct?
I don't know if I've heard that term, but that's entirely possible.
Okay.
I know rapid cycler is the fast one, but that is a term that I have not heard before, but it's entirely possible that that
Yeah.
is a correct term.
Yeah, I've heard some people that I know use that term, and they sometimes their depression can last a month or two, and then the mania may last a couple of weeks, or it's unpredictable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, I do find I usually have issues around like spring and fall. So spring, I tend to around this time is when I tend to deal more with the mania and hypomania, which is sort of, I guess you could call it mania light. Some people would call it that.
You also have the seasonal dysfunctional disorder.
I had been diagnosed with that a long time ago. I haven't gotten like my uh, when I was a teenager, I had been diagnosed with that. Um, I haven't had anybody, that I've seen in the last 10 years say that's definitely what I have, but it definitely affects me. I mean, I definitely, when I was living in Iowa, I was having more depression than I do here in Colorado with just having so many more days of sunshine.
Yeah. I think if I lived in Colorado, I'd definitely be depressed most all the time with all the cold weather and snow you guys get.
Oh, compared to the places I've lived, Iowa and Wisconsin, it's nothing.
Really?
It's nothing. Denver doesn't get as much snow as you might think. It's more the mountains that
Okay.
get a little bit more snow than Denver proper does.
When I hear Colorado mentioned, I think back on The Shining.
Oh yeah,
Now, is it true
that
that
is a movie.
bipolar people, you have a whole lot more lows than you do highs? Is that true?
Yeah, that's typically true. That's true for me. I definitely deal with a lot more depression than I do the mania or the hypomania,
Yeah.
which that would be a lot to deal with mania like all the time.
Yeah.
It would be hard to deal with.
Some people get a lot of things done though during the mania.
That's true. That's true. I
Yeah.
do sometimes get more things done during mania, but I feel so out of control
Yeah.
that I just don't want to. I don't want to keep feeling that way.
Yeah. In the past, I've gotten a whole lot of texts from my friends that have that going through the mania. So I know what cycle they're on by how many texts I get from them.
Wow. Interesting.
So tell us about your book. I know you wrote a book
Sure.
about mental health and movies, and what is the connection?
So yeah, so the book is Our Favorite Movies, How Films Affect Our Mental Health. And basically the connection between mental health and movies is that the movies we watch can impact us both positively and negatively, depending on the movie, depending on the person. So for myself, ever since I've been dealing with depression since I was 10 years old. And ever since then, watching movies has always been a way for me to deal with my symptoms, to lighten my mood, and also do things like connect with others. I named the book Our Favorite Movies because 10 of the 12 movies in the book that I cover um, are all movies that my sister and I grew up watching.
Yeah.
But there is research behind something called cinema therapy, which is watching movies as a form of therapy. And there's research behind exactly how movies affect our moods.
Yeah. I guess I can understand that. I've seen some movies I just have to be really in a mood for. And then there's one or two that I've watched over and over again and probably will watch some more. Uh,
Yeah, I call those your comfort movies.
yeah, yeah. So what movie has had the most effect on your life?
Sure. I would say there's the movie right now in my life, my favorite movie is Inside Out. And that's a Pixar movie, and it's about an 11-year-old girl, Riley, and how she and her family move from Minnesota to San Francisco. And it's about the five emotions inside of her mind: joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And what it's like inside of a 11-year-old girl's mind and with her emotions when you have to go through something like that, leave behind your home and your friends. So that's really important to me. And joy and sadness get lost in her mind during the movie, and they have to try to find a way back to emotional headquarters so she can feel those emotions again.
Yeah,
But over my life, I think the movie that it affected me most is The Princess Bride. And that because that was the first movie where I really realized how much it helped me, especially with my mania. And it's a movie I went to time and time again to watch when I was manic.
so if you watch a movie when you're manic, do you ever want to watch it again when you're depressed?
Yeah. Oh no. The reason why I say I watch it when I'm manic, and I have definitely watched it when I was depressed, but um when I watch it when I'm manic, it actually calms me down, and I don't really have the racing thoughts. I'm completely in the movie. I'm there with the characters. I'm in that world of The Princess Bride, and I just I'm not thinking about other things, and I'm not worrying about other things. I'm just right there with it. And usually I watch it at like 3, 4 in the morning when I'm manic, I don't sleep.
Yeah.
So when I can't sleep, and then, obviously there's no one to talk to, or not obviously, but in my life, most of the people I know are at bed at like 4 in the morning. So watching the movie is really what does it for me.
Yeah. So do you watch more movies when you're manic or when you're depressed?
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably more when I'm depressed. Um, well, first of all, like we were talking about earlier, I have more depression than I have mania. But when I'm manic, it's so hard for me to try to focus on things. So I could watch like The Princess Bride, or I could watch Inside Out, but I'm not going to be watching a ton of movies when I'm manic because I'm just going all over the place. And um, I still watch, like I said, I'll still watch The Princess Bride. I'll still watch Inside Out, but trying to watch like a new movie when I'm manic is really difficult because I just can't concentrate on something new.
Yeah. Do people come to you and say, look, I'm in a mood. Can you recommend a good movie?
I've definitely had people ask me, what kind of movies are good for what moods.
Yeah.
And so, I think that a lot of times, but I'll turn it around and say, hey, so like, you know, what are your comfort movies? What are the movies that you've gone to in the past? Because almost always, if somebody's in the mood, they could benefit from watching something that's comforting to them.
Yeah. Now, is there any one movie that you recommend to all people that are in some kind of emotional disturbance?
Yeah, I'm like I was talking about, like, Inside Out is something that I always recommend to people, is any kind of Pixar movies. I'm pretty much a fan of all the Pixar movies. I think those are great ones. A lot of the Disney movies are really good. I'm a huge fan of Frozen, which actually the main character experiences depression and anxiety in Frozen.
Is
Not
there,
everybody realizes that, but
yeah. Is there any movie that you highly recommend people do not see because it could be damaging to their mental health?
I, that's the whole thing, is I don't want to tell people what they shouldn't see, but I do encourage people to think about how things like, for instance, like the Saw movies or the super gory movies, that don't tend to really have any message to them, to think about putting some of those movies inside of your head, because I'm not the one to say, oh, well, you shouldn't watch this and you shouldn't watch this and you shouldn't watch this. But, maybe sometimes it's a good idea to think before we start watching things that are super violent,
Yeah.
um, especially if we already know that those kinds of movies can affect us. But if I had to choose, I would probably go with the Saw movies.
Yeah. But I know movies are a matter of taste. I'm sure you realize that. And I know some people like me love horror movies, and other people think they're horrible and can't even watch 5 minutes of one.
Exactly. And there are different kinds of horror movies, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some have a message, some are more like thriller scary, some are just like over the top gory.
Yeah.
But I know
Yeah.
for me, like, the different movies, like the movie Us, that one really got to me. Um, just like I'm in my basement and I'm like, I don't want to be in the basement anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah, The
Nothing
Shining,
good, nothing good happens in basements or bathrooms in the movies.
exactly. But there's
Uh,
so many of them are so good. I
yeah.
love Jordan Peele's movies,
Yeah.
and they're really good. So
Yeah.
it's hard, because you want to on the one hand you want to enjoy something, on the other hand you want to think about how it's affecting you.
Yeah. So obviously not all movies are therapeutic.
I would say no. Well, I would say, we're going back to the comfort movie things, right? Are the most violent movies therapeutic? It's a debate. It's a debate because it's about how it makes you feel.
Do you think watching violent movies makes people more violent?
I think it's a possibility that it's a risk factor. I talk about that in the book, about how there have been studies that have looked at whether or not I'm not saying that somebody watching a violent movie is going to go out and commit violence, but when you watch a lot of violent movies, it's a possibility that that can be a little bit of a trigger. It's not going to make you go out and hurt somebody, but it's something to be aware of. And it basically, I don't think one thing is going to lead to the other, but I think it's something to be aware of and to think about.
Yeah. Do you think horror movies in general are bad for your mental health?
I think I think that horror movies are bad for some people's mental health. And I think that people know, people are going to know that, and I think that watching, multiple horror movies every day or every week or every month is going to be different than watching one every year.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on how often you watch them, but I think it just, like I said before, I think it just depends on the person and how it affects them. But so, and it depends on the type of horror movie.
Yeah. So what makes a movie good? Is it the script or the screenplay or the actors or what makes a movie good?
Um, oh, that is a question. I think it's all of those things. I think it's the script, I think it's the actors, it's the director, it's, a lot of different things, go into every single movie. And I think I tend to concentrate more on the actors, partially because I did some acting in high school and college, and so that just seems to be more important to me than other things. But I'm also obviously a writer, so there's that. But I think because since I was a, you know, well, I've been a writer for a long time, but I think just the acting a lot of times is the most obvious thing. You got to think about it when it comes to the writing. Is that writing good? You got to think about it. But when it comes to the acting, that's very much obvious about if the acting is good or not.
Yeah. So what was your childhood like? Was it traumatic? Was it filled with happiness, sadness? What?
Right. Well, like I said before, I've been dealing with depression since I was at least 10. That's when I first remember. I first started thinking about suicide when I was 10, actually.
When you were 10?
And I, from what I can piece together, it was because I was bullied a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if there's anything else that was going on. But as far as my memory and the memory of my family, what was going on was that I was bullied and that I had body image issues. I've always been overweight, um, ever since I was little. So I've dealt with that and dealt with body shaming and bullying.
Yeah.
So I also have, sorry, my cat really wants to be part of things, don't you?
Yeah, I noticed.
So I also have a family history of mental health. My dad's father died by suicide when my dad was 8. So that's another reason why I've been dealing with the mental health stuff, is
Yeah.
because I have that genetically. But I always had problems socializing. I'm just not very good at making friends and sort of socially awkward, that kind of thing. So that was the difficult part. But I have amazing parents and a great sister. So um, I call it half a happy childhood in my book.
What would you say has been your biggest challenge in life so far?
Oh, I think dealing with the mania, and also I had to deal with psychosis some of the time in college.
Tell us about that. What does that look like?
Sure. So basically, for some people who have bipolar disorder, they also experience psychosis during mania, which I did for, I haven't for a long time, but I did experience psychosis sort of in my late teens to late 20s, when I was in mania. And um, things like what, so I've been hospitalized several times with the illness. And there was one time where I had a student nurse who was assigned to me, and her face would morph into different types of faces and different shapes. So I've had visual hallucinations. I've also had audio hallucinations, hearing things that weren't really happening, that kind of thing. And just paranoia. I would sort of believe that there were cameras hidden that were watching me, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So what's been your biggest accomplishment?
Definitely the book.
Okay.
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest accomplishment. Is been writing since I was 7. wrote a play about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So ever since I was 7, I've always loved to write, and I wanted to write a book my whole life. So ever since I was a kid, so I was very happy when I was able to accomplish that goal.
Have you considered writing your autobiography about your struggles with mental illness?
So the first section of the book really is at least a portion of my autobiography. So I do talk a lot about my struggles in the book.
Yeah, you probably would get a lot out of that, because a few years ago I did that. I wrote my autobiography about my struggles with depression, anxiety, and addiction. And it really was therapeutic. I mean, I got a great deal out of it.
Yeah.
So I think you would too.
What's the name of your book?
No One Walks Alone.
Oh, I
It's
like it.
available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all those big places.
Nice.
And where is your book available?
My book is also available on Amazon,
Okay,
both ebook and paperback.
okay. How big a role do you think self-confidence plays in mental health?
Oh, it definitely plays a big role, I think, in mental health. I think it's, I think about the people I know who have mental health issues, and how much, for instance, a friend of mine who has bipolar disorder, she's very self-confident, and that really seems to help her out with what she goes through, for sure. Although sometimes I think about, for myself, when I tend to be more self-confident when I get into the mania, but sometimes you don't want to have that self-confidence. You want to have a little bit of doubt that, okay, like maybe I shouldn't. This is not the best way to be doing, or best things to be doing. This is not the best way to be feeling. So I think self-confidence can both be a blessing and a curse, whether it's, you have it or you don't. It can really affect you and that kind of thing. But overall, I definitely would like to have more self-confidence. That would be great.
Yeah. So do you have that inner critic?
Yes, I 100% have the inner critic, and with my anxiety disorder, that definitely affects it. That definitely, it's hard to deal with. And with generalized anxiety disorders, they call it free floating anxiety, where it's sort of like, I'm just going to feel anxiety about everything and anything. So that doesn't help.
Do you think you self-sabotage a lot?
Yeah, I've definitely done my share of self-sabotage. But I just try to, when I realize I'm doing that, or somebody else points out that I'm doing that, I do my best to find another avenue to go down.
Yeah. Yeah, for some of us, that seems to come natural. So do you think fear is the biggest obstacle people have in living a happy, successful life?
I think that sort of illness is something that's a huge thing. I think that, not that people who have illness can't live happy and successful lives, but I think it can definitely throw a wrench in that. I know a lot of people who, deal with chronic illness, chronic pain, that kind of thing, and it can really affect people. With my disorders, definitely affect me, and that kind of thing. But I think there's a lot of different things, but I think fear and anxiety are right up there.
Yeah. So is asking for help a sign of weakness or a sign of strength and wisdom?
Oh, definitely a sign of strength and wisdom. None of us are going to get through this life on our own. We can't just, people try to go through life on their own, and I can kind of understand why, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I was 56 years old when I finally was able to admit that I needed some help and some medication with depression and anxiety. And that certainly made a big difference, as you can well know.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you were able to do that. It's not
Yeah,
easy.
no, it's not. And that was after being in recovery from alcohol and drugs for 26 years. And, I was supposed to have everything all together.
Because we all have everything all together, right, Steve?
Yeah, every time I think I have it all together, I don't know where I put it. Uh, so how common is it for people to compare themselves with others? That's pretty much universal, isn't it?
I would say so. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't do that.
Yeah,
Even the most famous rich person in the world is still going to compare themselves to other people.
yeah. If we do a fair comparison, I think it's healthy, but sometimes we don't. If I'm not careful, I'll look at my negatives and compare it to other people's positives, and obviously I fall short in that way. And sometimes if we try to imagine the way we feel on the inside and look at the way people present themselves on the outside, and there's a big difference, and you wonder, well, what's going on?
True. And I think sometimes though, another thing that can be really negative is to compare yourself and say, well, at least I don't have it as hard as this person.
Yeah,
You know, that I think that does two things. One, it might sort of uh sell that person short, but it can also mean that you're not sort of allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling.
yeah,
So I think it can sort of go both ways.
yeah. So, how do you personally define success?
Oh, I don't think I have a definition of success. I think success is something that's different from person to person, from moment to moment.
Yeah.
So I don't really think I have a definition of success.
For me, if I have peace of mind today, then today is successful. If I don't, then it's not.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with that. That's my new definition.
Okay. Uh, any advice for people that have bipolar? Any advice and or movies you want to recommend for them?
Sure. I would say advice. Um, let's see. I would say to definitely see a therapist, to definitely contact the so there's the suicide prevention hotline is a great line for everybody, because it's not just for people um who are in the act or have suicidal ideation. It's for anybody who really needs someone to talk to.
Yeah.
So I always suggest that people contact that line, um, and I can put the um, I'm having trouble off the top of my head what the phone number is for that, but we can always put that in the comments on YouTube. But I would say reach out to people who you trust to talk about what's going on. That there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a bad person. You're not a failure or anything like that. This is just something that's going on with your brain. And to, listen to the medical professionals if you have those in your life. Um, and just know you're not alone. And, we want you here on this earth. So stay with us and find ways to support yourself, and watch some movies if you need some comfort. Um, there's a lot of really great movies out there. I've talked about some of them. I recommend that you think about what kind of movies would be helpful to you. If you're interested in watching movies about bipolar disorder, there's a lot of really great ones out there. I'm a big fan of Infinitely Polar Bear and Mad Love And yeah, I'm trying to think what are, and Inside Out I think is good also for people who have bipolar disorder, so you can see, these are emotions that everybody has. Sometimes you have them to an extreme, but you're not so different from everybody else.
Yeah. And take your medication the way the doctor prescribes, and don't take those that aren't prescribed, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say that is, if you're taking medication, then definitely take it as the doctor prescribes.
I know people that sometimes want to self-medicate and they say, well, I don't like what the doctor put me on. It makes me feel bad. And usually that doesn't end well.
Yeah. And don't drink and take your medication at the same time.
Yeah.
That's not really a good idea either.
Hey, is there anything else you want to say that I haven't given you a chance to say?
I'm trying to think. Just that I really hope that people go out there and rewatch their favorite movies and think about some of the movies that I talk about in the book, including Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Fried Green Tomatoes, A League of Their Own, Contact, Little Women, 1994 version, Tommy Boy, and Joe versus the Volcano. So check out all those movies, and hope you might get a chance to check out my book.
Okay. And the name of her book, folks, is Our Favorite Movies, How Films Affect Our Mental Health. That's available on Amazon, and I imagine Barnes and Noble and Books A Million, all the biggies.
Actually, just right now, it's just available on Amazon.
Okay.
And if you want to go to my website for a signed copy, it's www.wearewritingwisely.com.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Anne, for being my guest. I have enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure others will enjoy what you have to say also.
Thanks, Steve.
So you have a wonderful evening. I will let you go. And folks, thanks for tuning in to Holding On with Holder. Please subscribe to my channel and feel free to share this video all over social media. And check out the book, Our Favorite Movies, How Films Affect Our Mental Health. And thank you again, and you have a wonderful evening.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you.
Bye-bye.